I introduce myself first. I'm Denis Sokolov. I'm head of research and analytics department in Cushman and Wakefield, and we have a wonderful panel of speakers today. Our today's urban forum is dedicated to comfort, to how we feel ourselves. We would like to work and live in a comfortable way and be engaged in other activities. So I'm representing commercial real estate. For us, the simplest thing is a shopping mall, a business center, a residential area. It's something which is very easy to control, but it is not very much in line with the requirements of our today's life. And we are more and more focused on the mixed use format. So this is a compound of buildings which contribute to each other, and the mixed-use format is changing because the world is changing and our customer is getting more and more demanding. So I would like to discuss today the details of this system which exist in this format. So allow me to introduce our wonderful speakers today. So today we have Ignati Danilidi, the General Director of GKA 101, Milena Inkovich, member of the board of ISOCARP, Sergei Kuznetsov will join us later on, Mark Williams, the Chief Executive of LDA Design, and also Bart Goldhorn, the Chief Architect of Brusnica Company. So let's begin, and I would like to pass it over to Milena Ivkovic, the member of the board of ISOCARP. All of our speakers have some small presentations, and we have, I would like you to stick to the agenda. We have 5 minutes for every one of our speakers.
Can we start? Okay, before we start, just a small introduction about ISOCARP. ISOCARP is an international association of urban planners based in Den Haag. And our core business is developing knowledge for better cities, organizing events and researches for urban development. I'm a member of the board of ISOCARP, and we are an international organization with, I think, something like 5 or 6 board members from all over the world. Can we have
presentation is there, yeah.
Presentation is there. Oh, but I don't see it on the screen. Never mind. Okay. What I'm going to say today, it's I've been asked to tell a story about mixed-use development. Why is it important and why do we need it in our cities? I will tell a story, 2 short stories from Amsterdam. First story is about an area which is called Amstel 3. It's a typical example what happens when you don't have mixed-use space, when you don't start planning with mixed use. This area was developed in the 80s, 70s and 80s, and it's been a monolithic, monofunctional area only for offices. It's been like that for many years, and the problem with this one is that actually it's completely dead. And then when the big crisis came in 2009, the amount of space that was empty really raised the questions, can we still build in this kind of monofunctional way? This story is actually about how you can use mixed use to kind of repair what has been done wrong in the past. And this area has been now improved a bit. It's a very difficult process to kind of try to retrofit what was done in the past and to reintroduce the mixed use in an area which is not being planned as mixed use. You can see on the image that densification of the area is very important. The area has been dominated with car development, with large infrastructure. all these separation of functions has now been completely redesigned, and new complexes have been built. Together with new complexes, there is also retrofitting of existing empty offices, and try to introduce better public space and better apartments, better living space in this area. The second short story is about another location in Amsterdam, the Amsterdam South, which is the new business center of Amsterdam, and it is completely the opposite example of what was Amstel 3. This area started immediately as mixed-use area. It has been planned as mixed-use area with about 40% of offices, 40% of living, and the rest are amenities. So from the start, it's been conceived as a mixed-use. What is important with this one, if we compare it with the previous one I showed, is there is a big accent of diversity of architecture and diversity of public space. If you compare how this area has been developed with the previous one, you just see there is the better use of space. The skyline is really impressive, and compared to the monolithic one type of architecture, in this area it was obviously chosen for more than 20 different architectural offices to be able to envision the space just to stimulate the diversity. Important factor in this development was also to take care about the surroundings. So the mixed area development is not just about one area. You need really to look beyond those boundaries and do also the facelift and the mixed use in the outside of the boundaries of the area. Sometimes it's not possible, but in this particular case, it was necessary to be able to really bring the quality in the newly development area. Now the development of this area took more than 10 years. It's still developing. The last phase will be in 2025, I think. But what it's really positive in comparison with the other one is that mostly young people are coming to live there. They're bringing completely new dynamic, and the municipality of the city has a very strong program in introducing different uses of public space. So public space is, since the beginning and the inception of this project, has been a very important factor, which was not the case in the previous one. Okay, there should be another one, but can we go to the last slide? Someone can manually? Yes, okay. This is just to conclude a little bit. This is the image from the area right now. And I will close this short introduction to just give several takeaways. Mixed use means also aiming for high density. It means for high quality architecture. It means thinking about the skyline, but also thinking about the street line or the streetscape. So it's not just how impressive it should be from looking from afar, but how good and impressive it should be from the eye level. Also important is to achieve diversity through architectural design. And it's a very typical Dutch recipe to achieve mixed use and achieve this quality of space by employing different architects and different architectural styles. That's how this image and quality is being achieved. I was briefly just talking about the necessity of mixed use as a area development, because both of these areas are quite big. But what is also most important, and in case of the Amsterdam Zuidas, the second example I'm showing, is to achieve the mixed use within the blocks itself, within the buildings itself. Because again, if it's just this kind of long row of similar buildings with similar functions and then just some small adjustments in public space, it's still not going to work. So the mix has to be both in the area development and on the level of the buildings. And I think that's the last one within the short 5 minutes I had. Thank you so much.
Спасибо большое. Спасибо большое, Милена.
Many thanks, Milena. Now, I would like you to pay attention to the fact, to things which are important. So the point of mixed use is the way to improve density and diversity in an area.
Public spaces, and what would you think? What should be, let's say, the share of public space in the mixed-use development?
Well, that's a bit of tricky question, of course, because some of the at least 15% should be public space, and that's one of the UN Habitat's indicators from their research on public space. The thing with, of course, that's a good thing, but public space nowadays means so much more. I would say next to these 15%, just think about the public space which is inside of the blocks, inside of the large shopping malls, inside of the large facilities, which is also a kind of public space.
Thank you very much. Спасибо большое. К нам присоединился главный архитектор.
Thank you so very much. So we have Sergei Kuznetsov, who is the chief architect of Moscow. So a question to you straight away, Sergei. A question to a person who is responsible for the image of Moscow. So many new residential complexes are being built together with our offices and shopping malls in Moscow. And Moscow speaks a lot about the mixed use. But what's your ideal view of a mixed use project in case of Moscow? Good morning, everyone. So sorry for missing the beginning of this session, but I believe that we started by saying that a mixed use is the only possible form for developing the urban space, and I think there is no longer a debate on that. So Moscow tries to go in line with other progressive cities. And recently we had a research on similarities and differences of what we do in Moscow as part of our renovation project. And also as for construction and development, putting in place new modern complexes. So as for similarities, we took a big range of cities, mainly European cities, because I believe Moscow is looks more like a European city than an Asian megacity in terms of mindset and the attitude to things and the understanding of space and the land plots, because the population density cannot be compared with that in Chinese or Japanese megacities. So in terms of population density and efficiency of how new developments are used, so we are similar to European cities. If we will look at our residential areas, mixed use is a relevant topic. And yes, we should mention the long Soviet tradition to build uniform residential areas, and renovation as a program is aimed at a shift. So if we talk about a renovation program, so we are even going ahead in terms of mixed use percentage compared to other European cities. And we have to mention our legislation, which has to do with the Soviet past, with advantages and disadvantages. So we have a big level of social guarantees related to social planning. And some people would say that situation is more human in the West. But if we would compare the norms and standards for the greenery, for accessibility of certain infrastructure elements, or the availability of installations, and this norm doesn't exist in Europe, and we would realize that we are not so very much different. So we are being criticized that we have new buildings with too many floors, but we know that people in Moscow and in other foreign cities live in high-rise buildings. So specialists would normally know the fact that social guarantees, which are supported by the public opinion, by doctors or firemen, so they are the driver of high-rise buildings. So we realize that the population density is high, but if we would talk about the healthy urban environments, they would make all type of services, healthcare and educational services more available to a high percentage of people. And if we would look into trends for the future, we should be more careful when we work with the legislation, with the land resources, and we should realize that one day we will have to make unpopular decisions. Thank you, Sergey. A brief question. Would you agree that a mixed-use format allows us to increase development density, increasing comfort for residents and users of the infrastructure? Yes, I would say this statement is 100% correct. And of course, any comparison with other successful cities would support it. Well, I'm not talking about Manhattan in New York City now. Yes, this is a good example. Some people believe Manhattan is the best city, but for others, it's like an urban monster. If we would take cities like Paris or Berlin, which are normally considered to be more human, if we would benchmark the figures, even back in the 19th century, these cities had higher population density than Moscow. And they are among the most successful cities, often considered to be an example of a very comfortable city. So this is what many cities arrive at. Thank you, Evgeny. Now I would like to pass it over to Ignatiy Danilidi, A101, the company that actually shapes the image of the new Moscow. And at the moment, together with A101, we are developing a tool for spatial development. And I would like to thank you for supporting us. And I would like you to tell us about your experience, about what you do, because recently your colleagues showed me the progress of A101 project, and we are impressed by your project. So we would like to hear to you.
Thank you so much. As Sergey said, today the function is clear to everyone. It is debatable, but this is what we have today. On the one hand side, you can see things which seem evident to you. So you may live and work, things are good, convenient, they should be like this. But how can we come to this? How could we have created this? For me, that did not look evident. This was an evolution for me. So I started to get from the ordinary apartments, blocks of flats, further and deeper in my mind. So you start to look around, you can see the yards, and you can see what is behind the yard. So you should realize the functions here, and that required quite of time. for me to realize what I was to do, how to transfer the ideas we had into real facilities. After that, we needed to combat the economical issues. Because we needed to create some facilities and functions which were attractive for investment. This is interesting, but that's been not an easy way. So this is one of our first projects. And that was the previous slide, by the way. So this is another project, Scandinavia. We started together with Sergei Kuznetsov. We discussed the project solution. So now you can just come there and see the results we have. This is the micro area with clear structure, penetration, accessibility, with some places for pedestrians, with activities. So we managed to combat all the challenges to meet them. So we have increased the functions. We have places for recreation, for sports. For that, we launched competitions. And this is the first stage. And it is about to be completed. As soon as she is, we'll invite Sergei Kuznetsov there so that he could see how our joint ideas came true. Educational facilities is another topic which seemed interesting for me, so that challenge we also met. The next stage or step is not just creating functions, but creating them of highest quality. We need to have more jobs. So what we have as a result is a human capital. So at the beginning, the density was enough. 1,000 to 1 hectare are not the figures, but people who should go there. So these are streets, public transport, which has made a revolutionary advancement in these 2 years. So the territories have really changed dramatically. So this is the population and its concentration. So 45,000-50,000 of the population we have today. When we started, there were about 18,000 people living there. Now we have 150,000. So there are new blocks of flats being constructed. People come there. So this area is developing and at top quality. We have preliminary basics for new people, for new activities, for interest centers. All this attracts new people, new citizens to these territories because they need to be inspired. Their quality of life should also be inspiring and seem inspiring for them. So today, I'm here to promote a project which we we're trying to discuss for several years, and this is a multifunctional cluster Prokshina. July 20, there was an honored launch of a new metro station. So there is a metro, there is a highway to Budva-Solntso-Warszawska, a parallel one, and another one, Lenina-Sharapova, another highway. Here, we are making a cluster of 132 hectares, and we are planning to place a multifunctional office and trading center there. So these are the primary functions which seem clear to us. So this provides the economics of today, and we are starting to realize that there is a competition for the concept for this territory. Here we'll take the decision for the launch of the project, and we started in the year 2020. Besides business centers, we are we experience, there's something else we do. It's a sports event park. We called it Adrenaline before mountain skiing in winter. And the mountain height is symbolic for our company, 101 meter. So there will be different heights for places for mountain skiing and some additional routes. And we suppose that will be a sports event block for all the year round. So besides mountain ski, there will be places and roads for velo bikes and other kinds of activity, about 130 functions. Another facility for festivals will be there. Some hotel complex for the visitors. And people who will participate in all the activities there. So this project we've launched, so it's time for that. There are new opportunities and a lot of investments, about 130 billion rubles totally. So we've launched this project, we are working there. This is the next step how these functions can be used. We have about 6 projects at work. For expanding and broadening the function. So this work is so interesting. It has no limit. We have the opportunity, if you have the opportunity, just join us and kindly invite my dear colleagues to join us and to participate in the territory's development, because this is not only we developing the area, but the city. Thank you so much. A couple of weeks ago, I participated in the activity by Urban Land Institute, and Carl Mickelson, the former mayor of Copenhagen, spoke there. This is the person who, since 1990s to the middle of 2010, did the renovation Copenhagen. You know what he said? He highlighted 2 lessons he had from that activity. Number 1. You need first to make an underground, the transport, public transport routing and the highways. After that, you need to start planning the living facilities, the houses. Since then, the transport habits start to be formed from zero. I just wanted to interrupt you. He is absolutely right. Not to construct at least, but to specify this component carefully, because Moscow didn't have enough time for this systemic approach. So we had the transport fundamental case approved, but the next year it was changed just dramatically. If it hadn't been like this, we would have made probably less mistakes. Maybe we would have made different ones. But when we started developing the territory, we would have prognosed it in a different way. So we oriented at the highways predominated by the first local plans. Then we oriented at the transport case, so we started realizing the projects and the city could see how to improve it. So today, adaptively, we correct and update our plans regarding the transport development. Transport accessibility and penetration is the most important thing. And I think that it would be interesting if Sergei Kuznetsov commented on it. Would you like me to comment on it? But I think we're taking time from another speaker. But I think this is really significant. Yes, the topic is significant. Infrastructure is the central point everywhere. You remember the POC guidance, by the way, it was constructed before all the transportation, and we did it on purpose. When we planned Zaryadia, we were in contact with all the parks, and that park including So it was clear to start construction in a different way. So sometimes you can do the transport post factum, post construction. But this approach I also would prefer, because you start from the transport, the area becomes more expensive, and it's not only the habits of people are launched and formed from the very beginning, from zero. It's just a more rational approach, clear enough, uniting of Moscow with some area which used to be Moscow region before, like the new Moscow. Changes everything. So does Moscow change her plans? Yes. But we can see the plans, we can study them. Sometimes, well, people are too fast, just want to work without planning. No, Sergei, I didn't want to say that you are doing things in a wrong way, just I wanted you to comment. Yes, you're absolutely right. We all know the optimal approach, but let's do it. One more remark that the same former mayor of Copenhagen told us about the instruments when they didn't know what was to be constructed, the metro or transport, but they agreed that the moment the metro was launched, they were ready to pay more. So because the land became more expensive. Oh, please don't include it in our agenda. I'm kidding, certainly, but let's go on. I would like to give the floor to Bart Golhorn, the company Brusnica. You are creating facilities around Russia. So what do you mean by mixed use? And is it a different approach from one region to another region? I don't come to Moscow very regularly in recent time, but I am a bit, well, it seems strange to me. I have information from the organizers that mixed use is good but difficult. In Moscow, things are great. These are 20 million and spaces, and we are quite successful in Moscow. It's more difficult going into the region. I was trying to analyze why it is so difficult to do it in Russia, and what we still try to do, because the idea is good, clear enough. There is an ideal approach to mixed use. This is the center of European cities, a historic center. So it has a long history, but it was planned several times with new buildings. So quite naturally, there is a mixed use, just historically, because it has a long history. This is also a city where small areas are very well linked. It's easy to get from one to another. So this is a cascade, and this picture I would call ideal. It's not happening everywhere in Europe, but there are not only historic centers in European cities, there are other areas which are more depressive, but Europe is trying to copy this experience. But the key role programming is doing by the municipal authorities. They are looking for stakeholders for this kind of projects. The process is always difficult and long and complex. As a result, this is what we have. Very interesting environment. It is a long-lasting and expensive project, always. the figures on construction are going down all the time because it's expensive. Housing is another problem here, which is also expensive. Here in Russia, we have a different kind of practice. The majority of the Russian cities were constructed in the 20th century in the times of the USSR. They also were driven by some special ideology, which is the modernistic approach. And that was the principle of functional subdivisions. It means the city where we work, there is this subdivision of functions. And the norms and the practices also reflect this area, the traditions of modernism, which is, again, not united but subdivided functions. So a city is like a big island, well, a lot of islands, like. So developers are the key actors here, not the municipal authorities. They have complex tasks. They need to be city construction, projecting, and sales. This experience is also quite precious. It has its advantages as well, especially for the municipal authorities. They do not have to be involved. They just goes, and the process goes on its own. Housing construction is the result. Well, this housing should be sold for some period of time. But there are other models for longer periods with housing renting. So in this kind of long-term modes we have in Europe, well, it is better because it goes for a long time and many actors want to fund development. This is what we have in Europe. Unlike Russia, where the developers are number one. So there are different ideas here. Some investors say, okay, let's do mixed use. But we have some regulatory documents. They allow to do it. They also are obliged to have jobs, but it's difficult. From the point of view of instruments, we need to fund it. All this needs to be compensated by selling of the apartment.
So, and this is something very bad for the developer, but also for the city. Because if you would have a new district without adequate employment, would be something really, really very bad. So, now, let's check. Yeah, I would like to show you another slide. Could you please switch this slide over? Okay, I think it's like radio interferences. Okay, here we are. Some very simple examples, but this is reality of how we work. A big compound, a big district, which is being built in Yekaterinburg. So this is a method where we have like a corner point where the architect will develop for us a drawing of a supermarket, but we will also ask a consultant who knows how to work with supermarket layout. Where would be the best location for a supermarket? So we move to a higher competency by attracting new consultings. Another interesting case from two men an industrial area. So here, at the ground floor, we have some retail outlets, but we see a double aspect here, like mixed use, because you need to integrate every district into the existing city. There are jobs in this district, and you can no longer build a district as an island, which would be only accessible by car. Yes, you need to integrate, and here we worked with other neighboring areas, with a shopping mall, with a park, with existing schools, to establish links with them, and we worked with the city government to develop different routes. For that, we had to replace a number of projects planned by the city for flyovers. Yes, and we managed to integrate this new district into the fabric of the city. That's another example of mixed use. And another big district in the central part of Yekaterinburg, where we would like to create a real mixed use, like in Amsterdam, as we heard from one of the previous presentations. And we will look for other developers which focus on different business areas. So the approach would be synergistics. If we work together, it would be favorable for us and for them, and we can get a district of a high quality. Thank you. As we are moving in time, I would like to give a floor to Mark Williams. Do you have slides, Mark? Yes, please hold your hand up, and then it works back.
Talk through some of our lessons learned from London, really. In particular, focusing on our work in...
Извините, коллеги, нам нужно отпустить Сергея Кузнецова, у которого сейчас следующий.
Dear colleagues, we need to let Sergei Kuznetsov go because he has another session. Let's thank Sergei for participating in our session as well.
There's some lessons learned from our project in London, in particular the Olympic Park in Stratford, which is really the reason we got involved working in Moscow. After our work on the Olympic Park, we worked on Gorky Park in Moscow, but also Serpa Mollet. And our starting point in London is just understanding people and place. For us, what we really want to understand is how we can make great cities. We consider ourselves to be city makers, and what we like to understand are the ingredients in the places that we design that make a great city and encourage people to want to be there. We did some analysis looking at London, and this is a heat map of where young millennial people like to live and like to socialize in London. And the interesting thing with that is if you overlap where creative industries and large multinational companies are now investing, there's a direct link between where commercial investors want to be and where young hipsters already are. And the commercial investors are looking to buy into the place and the lifestyles that the people demand if they're going to live and work for them. So for us, it's a bit of magic, really. It's the idea of mixing uses, the idea of building networks and skills, encouraging investment from anchor investors, but importantly, providing the 24-hour amenities that are demanded in mixed-use developments. And the key thing about all of that is identity, so thinking about conversion and adaptability of buildings. So moving to Stratford, so this was our work in the Olympic Park, and it started with a fundamental understanding of landscape, and landscape in many forms, understanding the economic landscape of the place, the social landscape, but for us also understanding landscape is more than just green space. It's actually a device that allows us to bring people together. And this was the Olympic Park back in 1995. We then won the competition to master plan the Olympic Park. It had to operate in games mode, so for the few weeks that the Olympic Games was on, but also thinking 10, 15, 25 years forward, how this could become a mixed-use part of city. And how we did that was putting in place a landscape structure that firstly allowed you to build a community around the park, so it allowed for residential to come into the mix. Secondly, it then allowed us to identify long-term development opportunities after the Olympic Games. We're now working on 3 of those projects, highlighted in red. Here East is the new digital quarter in London. This was actually one of the most difficult sites on the Olympic Park to convert. So these were the media and communication sheds that were used during the Olympic Games that have now been converted into research and development spaces. The important thing with that is then how you encourage a mix. Don't let one tenant come in and take all of the floor space. So actually we provided spaces in some of the shed buildings for makers to come in, so light industrial, but also for some food and beverage to come in, so it gives a life to the place at weekends. The other site that we're working on is Stratford Waterfront, which is the east bank of the Olympic Park. This is London's biggest investment in culture for 50 years, since the South Bank, and it features a new home for the BBC music recording studios, Sadler's Wells dance and production theatre company, but also the university space as well. The final project that I'll zoom in on is immediately south of the Olympic Stadium, and this for us was a master plan for UCL. UCL is one of the oldest colleges in London, have been in Bloomsbury, central London, for over 100 years, and this is their first move out of Bloomsbury to develop a new campus. And the brief was to make this a mixed-use social campus that could be used by the surrounding communities. There's the site in question, a difficult site, has to overcome a lot of infrastructure constraints, water features, rail infrastructure, and the way that we did that was think about a fluid zone at the ground floor. It's a permeable element that stitches the complete ground plane together. It starts to pull some of the public life of the campus down into the ground floor so that the communities in the adjacent areas can move through that space and benefit from the campus facilities. And how did we go about doing that? What was the inspiration? Well, firstly, we looked at the type of activities that would be created in the campus itself. So looking at the various fundamental uses that the university needed, but then understanding which of those could be taken out into the public realm and which of them could be publicly accessible, including in blue, you can see the idea of bringing residential into the campus. And then how did we do that? Well, for us, it was important to overlap the uses vertically, but also spatially on the plan. And we feel that where you get that overlapping of mixed uses, that's where you get excitement, you get drama, and that's where you create really authentic places that will last for 100 years, not 10 years. So starting with the place, what we really wanted to do was understanding the people in the surrounding communities, but also the students that would be coming to the campus, and what type of activities would they be demanding. I think London is a unique city where, for the first time, we've got 4 generations of people in workspaces. We've got people that are about to retire right the way through to millennials that are just starting their working career. And they all demand different things of their working environment or the environment they live in. So we really wanted to understand what the matrix was, how we could then bring that into the campus. So this is a detailed sketch of the fluid zone that we've created at UCL. It brings in social spaces into the ground floor that allow the community to come in. Some of the more private research and development lab spaces for the university sit above, but also it brings in student accommodation as well. So it's a 24-hour, 7 days a week environment. And for us, the vision for that is then to create social spaces. So whether it's a campus, an employment site, it's thinking about how we can bring the full range of mixed uses into it, create it a social environment, and in this instance, a social campus. Great news on this is that this morning I just picked up the news that yesterday afternoon, the Mayor of London was on site with a spade in the ground, and we're just starting the first phase on UCL.
Спасибо большое. Спасибо большое, Марк. Я не могу удержаться. Вы начали свою...
Thank you, Mark. So you began your presentation with a quotation by Jan Gehl, and 2 weeks ago I listened to Jan Gehl in Copenhagen. And I would like to quote him. So he said, it was not for the Russian audience, so he said that London was the least successful project of transformation in the world's history, but Moscow is the most successful project. And people in the audience were shocked, but I think this sounds like good news for us here in Moscow. And to wrap up our today's conference, I would like to pass it over to Denis Kolokolnikov, head of RG company. So who was first to analyze clusters in Moscow and do the special analysis. And my question to you, Denis, as a consultant, would be: so what problems you face and what solutions you offer to your customers? Denis, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. All presentations were very exciting. So mixed use is exciting, but it should be different for clusters and districts. So one solution would work for the downtown, the other one for the outskirts. So, like, imagine you have a district for 4,000 people, but if everyone would work there in the office, so the maximum ratio between the commercial function in the residential area is 16%. Not everyone would work in the office. So when you design a mixed-use district, you need to analyze the profile of the city. So in case of ZIL, a car factory in Moscow, when we analyzed it, there is like Derbenovskaya industrial zone, so where you have industrial areas 50,000 square meters per 1,000 square meters for 1,000 of populations, and there are a lot of shopping malls. So we wanted to persuade the city authorities that we need to add more commercial points. So today's technology allows us to forecast the concentration points for population and location of retail outlets, and we can identify white spots where we can add shopping malls, because in some of our districts we like them, and in some there are too many of them. So we need to weather the situation when people contribute to creating busy traffic on the roads. The third point I would like to mention that we are advocates of new urbanism. It's the situation when a person can get access to all life-important functions within 10 to 15 minutes time. So Bruce Nicker's approach shows that for every size of district you need a different mixed-use approach. But the main function for a dormitory district is about commercial and social infrastructure, about creative enterprises, healthcare, and then we should think about offices. And it's different in the downtown, in the center. And the commercial areas at the ground floors, they account for 5%. And with the additional commercial areas, you can get up to 10%, but not more. So if you would design a supermarket or a shopping mall, you need to take all the peculiarities into the account. And you need to focus job positions with high density created for new territories closer to the entry point to the district. So it should be a transportation hub or a metro station, which is the case of Moscow. So the more social functions and public spaces you have there, the higher is the economic efficiency of the business, and the higher is the comfort level for the people that would work there, and which would get an access from neighboring areas. Thank you so very much. Thank you, Denise. Thank you, colleagues. To wrap up, I would like to summarize in a couple of words our key outcomes. I am really happy that now, discussing development, we use the human dimension, because this is what we actually are in our profession. However, mixed-use format is much more complex, And earlier today we heard about a number of very different approaches. So importantly, it was said that this is the possibility to increase density without compromising the comfort. This is a chance to provide social diversity. So we haven't covered the topic before, but I'm sure our forum will focus on them. And I'm very happy that our forum is dedicated to creating level 2 comfort level. Today, well-being is not only about being healthy. No, it's not acceptable. Well-being is when you feel great in the city. So it means we are moving to a higher level. And now I would like to thank our fantastic speakers. Let me introduce them once again. Ignatiy Danilidi, the General Director of A101, Milena Ivkovic, Member of the Board of ISOCARP, Mark Williams, Director of LDA Design, and Bart Goldhorn, Chief Architect of Brusnica, and Sergei Kuznetsov, who already left, and Denis Sokolov, your servant, head of a department in Cushman and Wakefield. Feel free to contact us offline, and thanks for dedicating an hour of your time to our discussion.